Okay, so this is my manual muscle testing video for my elbow and forearm movements and positions. First, we would do elbow flexion. So I'd have my patient sitting for the video, and I'd ask them to have their arm up, straight up and down, and then I'd ask them to try to reach for their shoulder. And as they're doing that, I would stabilize their elbow just so the whole arm isn't moving around, and they'd reach up as far as they could up to their shoulder. And for the resistance test, I'd have them go about halfway. I put my hand on the inside of their wrist and have put resistance, so it would seem like I was trying to push their arm into extended position, and they would hopefully hold my resistance. But if the patient could not move their flex their elbow against gravity, we would be in a gravity decreased plane. So I'd have them put their arm straight out in about 90 degrees straight out, and I would stabilize their elbow, and they would bend their elbow into a flexed position like that. Next is elbow extension. I would first have the patient sitting down, and then they would start up with their elbow all the way up facing towards the ceiling. And then for extension, I'd ask them to see if they could straighten out their elbow as far as they could. And for the resistance test, I'd have them have a soft elbow, and I would put my hand on the outside of their wrist and see if I could try to push their arm to make their elbow bend back into flexed position, and hopefully they could hold my resistance. And if the patient could not extend their elbow against gravity, then I would have them start out like this, and I would stabilize their arm at their elbow just so they couldn't move their whole arm around, and then I'd have them straighten out their arm. Next is forearm supination. So we'd have the patient straight on. I would have the patient put their arm up against their body and have them stabilize them at the elbow, just a little bit above the elbow, and I'd ask them to try to make their palm face up towards the ceiling. And for the resistance test, if I was a different person, I would put my hand around the wrist and try to get them to put their palm back towards the floor, but hopefully they could hold my resistance and not do that. If they could not move their hand in supination against gravity, we'd have them start out with their elbow and their arm in 90 degrees. I'd stabilize their elbow, and then I'd ask them to supinate this way so that the motion is parallel to the ground. And lastly, for forearm pronation, we do the same thing as supination. Have their elbow tucked in. I would stabilize them right above the elbow and have them tucked in so they couldn't move their arm around. And I would ask them to turn their hand where their palm is towards the ground for pronation. And for the resistance test, they would be in pronation. I'd put my hand around the wrist, and I would try to get them to turn their palm back around into supination. And if the patient could not turn their hand into pronation against gravity, it'd be the same thing as this. And they would start out with their palm facing away from them, and I would stabilize their elbow, and I would ask them to turn their palm away from them just so the motion is parallel to the ground in a gravity decreased plane. All right, thank you.